at paper 2 topic, and the topic that we're going to do first, we'll actually be looking at 2 topics, but the topic that we will be doing first will be my inventory valuation. And the second one that we will be looking at will be the manufacturing. Paper 2 topics in which you surely can score good marks. So these are the concepts as well as calculations that we will be looking at, and then we will move on to manufacturing for today. So let's move straight onto the inventory evaluation. That is our topic for today. Now let me put this into perspective. Inventory valuation happens after we have traded for a specific financial period. So we want to value our inventory that we have left. Okay, so once we have applied either the periodic or the perpetual inventory system in the calculation and the writing up of our cost of sales, we're now at the end of the financial year, and now we need to value the stock that we have left. We have available 3 methods. The first one is the methods of valuing my stock. The first one is called FIFO, standing for my first in, first out method. So the stock that I purchase first, I will sell first. Therefore, we make the deduction that the stock that we have left is automatically the stock that I have purchased last. Then we move to the weighted average method. In this method, we look at getting the average price because it's quite difficult for the undertaking or the business to determine in which month they have purchased a specific item. Therefore, they apply the average method. We get an average price, and that average price is then multiplied by the number of items we have left at the end of a financial year. Then my third method is my specific identification method. Allow me, grade 12, just to at least tell you in which instance businesses will be applying the various methods. So your FIFO valuation method is where we basically have the price of our items at the most recent price. Oh, so it could be either that those items are not too expensive, neither is it your low-cost items. That is the FIFO method. So very important, items are shown at its most recent prices. Weighted average, on the other hand, we will apply when we value items that is in large quantities. The value or the rand value of those items is usually not very expensive. And it is also that the items are many a times, they are identical. So that is when we use weighted average. The specific identification is geared at your expensive, exclusive items. Usually big items, example like a car, expensive television, but it can also be smaller items like an expensive watch or jewelry that is relatively expensive, and then we apply the specific identification method. What sets this method apart? Each item has its own individual cost price. So in summary, these are the 3 valuation methods that we will apply throughout in actually today's session, where the various questions cover the 3 methods. So let's move on and just look at an example where we will apply the FIFO method, the first in, first out method. So what's important, grade 12s, when we do valuation, the first thing we go and look at is how many items we have left at the end of the year. But specifically in this example, they don't give you the items that you have left. You actually have to calculate the number of items on hand, unsold, or that you have left at the end of 31st March 2023. 25. So let's look at our information that we have available, right? So the month is March. So the units that we have available, right? So it's from January to March. So we're looking at a 3-month period. So my opening stock for January is 13. Then I've purchased for the 2 months in total 27 items. How do I know I've purchased? It is my 15 in Feb. It is my 12 in the month of March. And together I get a 27. What else is important to note? This business was unhappy for whichever reason, and they returned some of the items that they've purchased in the month of March. Therefore, immediately we can make the deduction that for March, you no longer have 12, but you only have 10 items left. The fact that 2 of those items were returned. So let's answer these few questions systematically, because this sets the tone and the basis for us to complete today's session in inventory valuation. So let's answer. They've actually worked it out for us. Let's see how it works. So we must calculate the unsold items. So surely we're going to start with the amount of items we have at the beginning of the period, which is January 1st. I have 13 items. Then I have purchased in total 27. That is my 15 plus my 12. So I have purchased 27 items. Then we've returned the 2. And then they tell us that you have units that we have sold 20. So those are the items we had available. Of all the items we had available, we sold 20. Therefore, I'm putting it in brackets. So the business has in total grade 12s, they have 18 items remaining. We've answered question number 1. Let's move to question number 2. Now that I know how many items is left, I now need to find out what is the value of those items. So now I'm going to value my stock. How do I go about to do that? Let's go down. Now we're applying the FIFO method. So we now need to be meticulous. For March, do you clearly recall we only have 10 left because we have returned 2. But that shouldn't really be your starting point. Your starting point should be, you must write down and indicate in total we have 18 items left. So we work towards the 18 items. How do I do that? I then go back and I go determine what is the number of items I've purchased last. March is the last month. Remember, I don't have 12 left. I only have 10 left. Therefore, I need to look at, very important, what is the unit price of the items that I've purchased in March? That is R7.50, but I only have 10 left. Okay, so let's go and indicate that in my calculation. I have 10 items left of March at the price of R7.50. It gives me a rand value of 75,000. Sorry, 75 rand. Sorry, grade 12. Then we need to move on, and we now need to check. That 10 doesn't bring me to my 18 yet. Therefore, you must now deduce that the other 8 items that the business has left must be of the items that was purchased in the month of February. So in February, in total was purchased 15, but I automatically must make the deduction. I have 8 left of the month of Feb, and I'm going to multiply it by my 7 rand unit price. If I do that, I come to the following amount. So 8 items left, 7 rand per unit. It gives me a 56 rand. Therefore, the rand value of my items that I have left at the end of March is 131 Rand, the value of it. So we're referring to the Rand value. Let's quickly recap. March, I have 10 left. You originally purchased 12, but I returned to 10 items at its cost price, unit price. Then Feb, I automatically know I must have 8 of Feb left. Why? Because in total I have 18 items remaining, 10 belonging to March, therefore the other 8 must be of February. So I'm sitting with a value for my closing stock of 131 Rand. Can we move to our next question? The next question asks for the cost of sales. Now, grade 12, when it comes to the cost of sales calculation, surely by now you are very clear on the formula. So the formula says you take your opening stock, you add purchases, but together with the purchases, you add your carriage on purchases should there be carriage that is indicated separate. In this case, they don't give us the carriage, but be aware, take cognizance of the fact that carriage forms an integral part of my cost of my goods. Then it is that we're going to deduct the items that was returned, the Rand value of that, and we're going to also minus my closing stock, which we now have just calculated. We can also call that my end stock. So let's go and extract our figures. Where do I get the 65 Rand from? My opening stock. If I can move up just a bit higher, that is its Rand value. That surely makes sense, the 65. Then I have purchased for the 2 months, in total the 105 plus the 90 Rand. So I am sitting with a total purchases of 195 Rand. I hope you are clear on that, where I'm getting these two figures from. So my opening or beginning plus my total purchases. Then it is, do you recall, they were unhappy, the business wasn't too happy, and we return goods. 2 items, but the Rand value of those items is 15. Therefore, it comes in brackets. We are deducting the returns. We have now, just in the prior question, we have calculated what the closing stock value is. Do you recall the 131? Therefore, we take this 131, which is my closing stock. I will deduct it from what I have now just done previously. If I do so, I come to cost of sales value of 114 Rand. So at this point in time, grade 12s, I hope you are following me. This is basics, which we actually do in our grade 10, our grade 11 year. But it is crucial for us just to remember our formulas, because this is really easy marks. Let me recap. My opening stock plus my purchases. Should there be carriage, I will add that. In this case, my returns was 15 Rand. I'm going to deduct the 15. My closing stock that I've just calculated is 131,000. So I'm sitting with cost of sales of 114 Rand. Now, gross profit is relatively manageable, easy to calculate, because you know this actually is the top part of my sokkie. So I will take my sales, which is given to me at 240. So units sold will always be so units sold slash, I could also call that my sales, adds up to an amount of 240. So that I will use in my calculation over here, 240. Then I've just calculated cost of sales. I will put that in brackets and I will deduct it from my sales. Therefore, we are ending with a gross profit of 126 Rand. Grade 12s, in this case, we have worked basic calculations which will form an integral part, but the core that you need to understand here is how to value your stock using the FIFO method. Allow me to move on and explain the weighted average method. Once we're done with these examples, we will move on to a specific question which will be dealing with these or these various methods of valuation. Okay, we're looking at the weighted average. Remember, here we get the average price. Difficult to determine when we purchase which item. Therefore, the business will now get an average price. Now, with weighted average grade 12s, there is a formula. Come, let's go through the formula. So looking, our numerator will be my opening stock, rand value. Then I will add my purchases. Then I will add my carriage. And then I will deduct my return. Sorry, that is now not in one row, but let's go through it. My numerator consists of the rand value, opening stock, plus my purchases, plus my carriage, minus my returns. Then at the bottom, which will be now my denominator, I will be looking again at opening stock, purchases, minus the returns. What is the difference between my numerator and denominator? My denominator will be containing, or it will have the units pertaining to the opening stock, the units that relates to the purchases, as well as the unit that relates to the return. Be careful, the purchases and the carriage are actually intertwined as a cost. So don't double count the amount of items we have purchased. So grade 12s, let's apply. Usually learners score very well here because they know how to apply the formula. So let's apply. What are the important totals that we're going to use? We're surely going to use our opening stock. Then we're going to look at what we have purchased in total, the rand value, together with the number of items or units. I'm just highlighting what we're going to need. Very important, in the beginning we had 850 units. So we're highlighting what we're going to need. And then it clearly tells me over here that we have carriage to the value of 410. Okay, nowhere do I see information of returns, but you at this point in time, you are very clear that we will deduct the returns should there be any returns in a question. As ma'am has indicated, if you don't mind, can I write there that the top part is my rand value and the bottom section will be where I'm going to look at the units. So my rand value is as follows. My opening stock, and I indicate the rand value at 6,800. Then I'm going to add my purchases. Its rand value is 31,840. Intertwined with the purchases will be my carriage on purchases. So this 410 will be added. That forms my numerator. Now, very important for you to remember is that once we do, or if we do this calculation, you simply just link your rand value to your number of items. Your rand value to your number of items. Now, what is almost a bit different or difficult here for you would be that the purchases of the various months hasn't been added. Take a minute, grade 12s, and add those figures, those three over there. So they've given you the total separate. Take time and quickly add the units of 1020, plus you're going to add the 940, plus you're going to add the 740. If we do so, you should come to items purchase of 2,700, and we're going to add the 850. If you don't want to go that route, simply just add all of them. You come to items that you have at the bottom, 3,550, and your rand value on top of that calculation would be 39,050. So I've added the top, which is my rand value of my units, and then at the bottom I have the actual units, and it comes to 3,550. If I do this calculation over here, I actually come to an average price, of 11 rand. I come to an average price of 11 rand, right? There's my 11 rand. Now, what do we do with that price? That is the average of all your items that you have purchased over this period together with your opening stock, right? I multiply that by what? Obviously, I now need to go and highlight how many items do I have left at the end of that specific period. And the number of items I have left is 300. So your average price per unit, multiply that by the number of items I have left at the end of that period, will be, it tells you that your closing stock value is 3,300. So that is the weighted average. So how does that differ? We get first to a calculation to get what the average price is. Then we multiply it by the number of items remaining. Then grade 12s, we need to calculate now what is the cost of my sales. So the cost of sales, if you can recall, let's go and do that calculation. I'm going to start with my opening stock. I have purchased items to the value of 31,840. In this example, we have carriage of 410. I'm going to add it. Just take cognizance that it could also be that there could be customs duty should the business be importing goods, and then we need to consider that as an additional cost that needs to be added in the calculation of cost of sales. Then we have now just calculated what my closing stock is, applying the weighted average method, or the WAM, and then we deduct that 3,300, we will end up with cost of sales of 35,750. Okay, so at this point in time, what is important for you to be able to apply the formula, to understand that we first get the weighted average per unit, and then we multiply it by the number of items that we have left, and then we were sitting with our closing or our end stock. Now we're going to move on to an exercise. So here we'll take our time. We will clearly analyze what it is that they want us to do. So in this case, they asked us to calculate the value of my closing stock according to the FIFO method. So we've just now had an example of the FIFO. So let's do one question at a time so that we can obtain our marks. So we can obtain 5 marks in this calculation. So surely we are going to need our information. So what is the important information that we need to extract over here? Very important, we look at how many items I have left at the end of that financial year. I must now find out what is its value. So this is number of generators, they're selling generators, but I need to find out what is its value. And I will now use my information that they've given to me in order to do that. Very important, if we apply the FIFO, I make the number of items that I have left, I make that my center point of my calculation. So what ma'am has prepared for you is the following. We need to find out what items or how many items have I purchased last. That's a very important point in this calculation. And then I also need to find out, was there any items that we have returned? And in total, they're telling us that we have returned 8 items. So now I have, let me go back and show you what information ma'am has extracted. They want the rand value of my closing stock at the end of the year, applying the FIFO method. That is what they want. Sorry, the FIFO method. I need to find out what's the value of that 197 items. So my starting point will be, I'm going to work towards that. Moving on, grade 12s, I need to go and determine how many items have I purchased last. Together with that, I need to find out, have we at any stage returned some of the items we've purchased last? What does that tell me? The items I've purchased last cannot be standing on 185 any longer. It will be the 185, and I can then minus my my 8 items, and it will bring me to 177 left now because I've returned 8 of them. Okay, let's just highlight that. I have 177 left for the month of May. Clearly you see that 177 does not bring me to the 197 yet. Therefore, I must have 20 items left of the month of February. Why is that important to note? Because the price per unit will now be different for the 2 months. So what is summary? I have 177 left for the month of May. That doesn't bring me to the 197. Therefore, immediately I make the deduction that I must have 20 items left of the month of Feb at the price of 3,900. Why is that? Because I'm working towards the 197. Some of you have different methods, or your educators have shown you just another way of doing it. But grade 12s, you need to stick to the method you're comfortable with to get to a correct answer. So let's do that calculation. Very important. I need to note that the rand value is 3,900 for the month of Feb, and the rand value is 4,200 for the month of May. So let's go down and let's go do our calculation. So 1.1.1, do you see what ma'am has done? I have highlighted the 197 items that I have left at the end of the financial year. Now, I said I make that my center point. Now I need to move to what items do I have left for the month of May, because that's the last month. Let me go back. That's the last month that I have purchased. Do you recall that Mama said we only have 177 left? Now, grade 12s, it's very, very important that we show our calculations. So I'm showing that I have 177 remaining, but show that you have taken the 185 and you have deducted the 185, and you have deducted the 8 items that was returned. Okay, so I'm showing how I got to the 177 items that I have left. Okay, then I don't know if you can clearly automatically see that the items that must be for the month of Feb will be the 20 items. How do I know that? Because I'm working bottom up, and the minute I work bottom up, I will take the 197, take off the 177. Then I know I must have items left for the month of Feb. Okay, 20. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to include what is its unit price. If you can recall, let ma'am show 3,900, and then for the month of May, the unit price is 4,200. So now we're going to apply and use the unit price to get the value. So if I do that, I know I have 20 items left. The rand value of the 20 items is 3,900 each. Okay, and then the rand value of my items that I've purchased in the month. You can go as far as to write Feb and May there. We have a rand value of 4,200. Now we just simply need to do a calculation. It is obvious that I'm going to multiply it with those, the rand value and with the number of items. If I do so, you should come to a rand value of 78,000. And then for the month of May, you should come to a rand value. Let's take a minute. Some of you are quite fast. We come to a rand value of 743,400. Okay, so if I add these two, remember I want the rand value of my closing stock now. So if I add those, you should come to a rand value. Obviously, you're going to do the calculation with me. Your rand value of these two added will be 821,400. So this is the value of my closing stock. That's 1.1.1. Now we move on. The next question. Let's go and check before I just jump into the question. They want us, the owner, Mbali, is concerned about the management of stock regarding the stock levels and stock control. So now we need to prove with a calculation what it is that we now need to do in this calculation. So they ask us to calculate the average stock holding period, and thereafter we need to do a calculation that actually justifies the level of concern for Mbali. The minute you see the word concern, you can guarantee yourself that it will be that we need to calculate if there was stock stolen, okay, or another word for that, is it that there is any stock that is missing? Concern will always bring you to this point, but let's do one calculation at a time. They want us to do the stock, average stock holding period. What are we going to do over there? Once again, you need to understand and know the formula how to do your stock holding period. The minute they mention period, you know we're going to speak about days. So ma'am has started out by indicating what is my beginning stock. So I've indicated beginning. Let me show you where I'm getting that amount from. Sorry, let me just extend that a bit over there. There is my beginning stock. There's my beginning stock. Let me move it over there. My beginning stock's value is 480,365. They're giving that amount to us. So you by now are so clear on how to apply your formulas. Remember the formula sheet is given to you. So I'm going to use my beginning stock. Then I'm going to use the stock that I've now just calculated, which is my closing stock. Getting the average grade 12s is relatively a manageable calculation. You've got a choice of the following. Before we get there, do you see ma'am has put in my beginning stock? Then I'm going to add the closing or my end stock. And we have now just calculated that amount at 821,000. So ma'am is bringing that figure. I'm bringing down over here 400. And the next step in the calculation, once again, you choose how you're going to do it. Either you put a half in front of that calculation or you divide that by 2. It will give you the exact answer. So if we do that grade 12s, what we're doing here, we're saying, I'm taking my, just allow me to move the one more to the side. Oopsie. Undo. Okay, I've moved the one to that side, so there's my beginning stock. I've added my end stock or my closing stock, divided it by 2. Why? I need the average. All of that over 1. Why are we multiplying it by 365 over 1? You know for a fact that my stock holding period can be in days. Usually it is in days. Some learners prefer to do the calculation and give it in months. We're going to stick to where we're going to do it in days for today. If I do that calculation, grade 12s, I come to a number of days of 114 days is that stock will be on the shelves. So that is the stock holding period. There are other ways of working this out. If I look at units, you could also use the number of units in your calculation, grade 12s. Allow me just to show you, if you use the units, you will come to a number of days that is slightly different to this one, but for now we will concentrate and leave that we apply the stock value. Okay. Let me just indicate what you will do if it is that you're going to use days. So you're going to say, I have left 197 items. Then in your information D, it tells you how many items you have sold, right? 115. Let me just highlight that. So if I do that, I actually will divide that 197. I will divide that by 515. I will multiply it by the 365. I will come to a number of days of 139,6 days. Now, you can see there is quite a big difference between the two. Therefore, ma'am is saying, although they will accept this answer over here, you can decide which method you're going to use, either where you look at units or where you look at the rand value. Okay? both those answers will be accepted and you will gain your marks. Still part of 1.1.2, they asked us to do a calculation in support of where the owner or the owner has a concern. Remember, ma'am told you, if there is a concern, we now need to find, is there any items missing? Is there any of my items stolen? Be very careful. Ma'am has highlighted the word units over here. We always work in units when it comes to missing and stolen, unless the question asks you for its rand value. So let's do this calculation. The formula is as follows, very similar to that which we use when we calculate cost of sales. So I take my beginning items, I add what I have purchased, I deduct what I have returned, I deduct what I have sold, I deduct what I have in the form of closing stock, or you could say the items that I have left. That will then indicate to you clearly how many items or if items was stolen. Can we, for our purposes, grade 12s, can we move to find out where I'm getting those items from? So I have, right at the beginning, I have 85,000, I have 85 items. Then, sorry, I have 85. Let me go back to that, 85. I have purchased items of 640 in total. Then it indicates that I have returned 8 items. What else is important? I have, here's my sales, I have sold 515 items. Then the very last important bit of information here, I have left 197 items. Clearly, you've seen that ma'am has now just concentrated on the number of items. Let's recap. 85 beginning. Purchased 640. Returned 8 items. Sold 515. And then I have left at the end 197. Can we put all of those in our calculation and then let's obtain our marks that we will be awarded over here? So in the beginning, I have 85. I have purchased 640 items. I have returned, they were unhappy, and I have returned 8 items in total. If you can recall grade 12s, the number of items that we've sold, we're also going to deduct. I've touched on it a number of times now. We sold in total 515 items. And then we have left, or my closing stock is a total of 197 items. Now, you could group this together, but I prefer to do it this way, then you're guaranteed of your marks. So if we do this calculation, my beginning plus my purchases minus my returns minus what I've sold minus my closing stock, you should come to the number of items that was stolen, missing, or the owner has now concern will be 5. The minute items are stolen, we do have a concern, whether it's 5, whether it's 20, the owner should have a concern, and then methods of better internal control should be put in place. Okay, so in this case, grade 12, they have not asked that question. We will cover that in the next section of the question we're doing, or the one that follows. The next calculation that they want us to do now, use the exact figures. We're using the exact figures, but we're going to use the weighted average method now. Okay, so my weighted average method will be as follows. I take my beginning stock rand value. Let's quickly go and check where we're getting that from. My rand value at the beginning is that 480,365. So that's my beginning stock. Then I'm going to add my purchases. My purchases comes to an amount. Can we go and check? Purchases comes to a figure of 2,453,400. I'm going to use that. Then we need to take cognizance of the fact that we need to take off and check what is the value of those items that I have returned. Now, if you can recall, we have returned 8 items, and the value of that items is 4,200 each. So ma'am is now not going to come back to this information because I now need to do the calculation. Let's extract purchases, returns 8. I'm going to multiply it by the 4,200 because that is the cost price of the items I have returned. If I do so, my calculation will be as follows. My purchases plus I'm going to add my opening stock plus my purchases of 2,453 rand 500. So it's 2,453,500, right? Then I'm going to deduct my returns. Now the returns comes to a value of 33,600. Where have I obtained that figure from? Allow me grade 12s to indicate to you what I've done. So I've taken the price of 4,200 and I have multiplied that with my 8 items that I have returned. So beginning plus purchases minus returns is that will be my numerator. Now we come to where we need to work on our denominator. So our denominator, we're going to link the number of items with each of these. So grade 12s, do you recall that we have beginning, we have a number of items standing at 85. We have purchased 640. We have returned 8. So let's go and do that, fill in the number of items. Okay, so it's 85 plus I have purchased 640 items. And I have returned 8. If I do that calculation in the number of items there as my denominator, I should come to a total items of, let me just bring this up. I should come to a total items of, as my denominator, 717. Let's give you time just to find out if you come to the same number of items as my denominator. My numerator in turn will be my 483.65 plus the 2,453,500 minus the 33,600. Please do that calculation and find out if you come to a total of 2,900 and 2,9,265. Once we do that calculation, we will now come to an average price. Now, if I'm giving you a minute to work out and do this calculation to get what my average price is. If I do so, we give you a minute to do that calculation. Your average price, I will then multiply with the number of items that I have left. Okay, by now you should have it. Your average price is 4,060. Your average price is 4,045 Rand. We're going to multiply that with my 190 items that I have remaining, or my end stock, closing stock in the number of items. If I do so, I come to a Rand value of 796,865 Rand. This is the value of my stock applying the weighted average method. Okay, so we've done it over there, so ma'am can delete that. So we have now done the question 1.1.3. Okay, I hope you have come to that answer. Now the next question, grade 12, speaks of control, measures of control that needs to be put in place. So it is that let's quickly go back and read the question before we just go to an answer. Right, we've done the calculation where we've done the closing stock, right? According to the weighted average method. Now they want us, we've done our calculations, they want us to do at 1.2.1, they want us to calculate the following. Let's read. Apart from selling generators, Crush Electronics also sells one brand of gas stoves. They have 3 branches, and it is the following that has been highlighted. In different plazas, they're telling you what the places are: Eikenhoek, Ermelo, and Tonga. These branches is managed by, they're telling us who the managers are. Now, specifically, although Mbali Fakudi allows the branch managers to generally make decisions, their own decisions, she has implemented division of duties, cameras, internal audit as control measures at the branch. So there are control measures in the branch, but this is what has transpired, and we now need to put and understand what it is we need to put in place. The internal auditor discovered a shortfall of 40,000. What does that relate to? It was specifically for cash sales. So if it is for cash sales, surely that amount of money had to be deposited in full, but a 40,000 was missing. So, and it was not deposited. An additional control measure needs to be mentioned now that she can put in place, apart from those measures that she has put in place in order for her to have better control. Now, cash becomes almost a bit tricky or dangerous because it is, first of all, not safe, right? So what can we put in place to avoid having large amounts of cash either on the premises or having to deposit the money? You know, in today's life, things are faster, more efficient, and we can use electronic methods. So the first answer here would be you would encourage your clients to pay via EFT. That would be a first clients, or you could say your customers, to pay via EFT, right? So you encourage them, sorry about that, you encourage your clients to pay via EFT method. It's safe, it's easy, and it is more efficient, right? Pay via EFT. Or just you could say make use of EFT. That's shorter. Then grade 12s, surely we can look at doing online shopping, or introduce where we allow our customers to shop online. Okay, again safer, not having cash involved. Then the policies that has been implemented as cameras, division of duties, but not much effort has been made. Although there's division of duties, you need to ensure that you do regular deposits. Why regular deposits? Because that avoids large sums of money to be on the premises. So you can say make regular deposits. So you implement that in your policy so that we do not have large quantities or amounts of cash on the premises. The other aspect that can be avoided is you can also avoid, allow me to write that in the rolling. You can also avoid the rolling of. What do we mean by that? Where a person in charge of the cash can go out and perhaps make use of the money that's available, and then they wait on sales or the next set of money that comes in to fill. So you roll the cash. The one deposit fills the void of the previous one. So there will always be a shortfall. So if you do not have large cash amounts of cash on hand or on the premises, this can be avoided. So those are the possible answers that we need to put there. Ma'am has given you more than one. They have just asked for one, but I've indicated all three possible answers. Remember, if they ask for one, you give them one. Okay? Not more than what they ask. Right. Now, the next question, we must now identify possible problems indicating that with figures and calculations relating to the Ermelo Plaza. So we will only be able to do so, grade 12s, if we actually move and we go to that information. Okay? So let's move and go and check what they are saying in my information. If I look at Ermelo Plaza, let's highlight what you see, what's a matter of concern. Usually we look at, has there been any returns? What is the number of items on hand? Is that very high? Is it that there is a possibility of rolling off cash? Then we can also look at, in this case specifically, how many days is it that the employees are working? What is the number of assistants that the Ermelo Plaza has compared to the other two? We usually compare the branches. So the first item that I would highlight is we need to find out what is it or what percentage of its sales is for cash and what percentage of its sales is on credit. Okay, so I will look at percentage cash, I will look at percentage credit. So here is my credit sales. Okay, here is my cash sales. Okay, so in total, my sales adds up to 3,000 units. So if I take 2,400 items divided by the total sales, I then discover that my credit sales, adds up to a whole 80%. That is what I'm discovering here. Automatic. You can make the deduction that my cash sales is only 20%. My cash sales is only 20%. It jumped. Let me put it over there where it belongs. And we close up that bracket. So I will make mention of that. Remember, the minute your cash sales is much less in percentage than your credit sales, it simply means that this branch now has to wait on that debtors to pay. They don't have the immediate cash available in order to operate and to make maximum profits in the business. Okay, so what are we going to indicate? We're going to say that my credit sales is 80%, my cash sales is only 20%. That's an important factor. What else can I highlight? If I look at the number of days that this business is open, compared to the other two, they only open for 5 days. So surely I can mention that. Then the other point, so let's highlight what we're going to mention now in answering that question. The other important point is they only have, you could say they're short-staffed. That is what you could actually indicate in that case. How many days they're working, as well as how many assistants. So all of that information we're going to use, and we're going to answer the question over here. We're first going to indicate the problem with a figure and what the possible solution is. So if you can recall, all that you can just write there is cash sales equal to 20%. And then you can indicate that your credit sales is equal to a full 80%. That's a matter of concern. Now, what do you suggest? Let's do that immediately, because now we look at a possible solution there. Clients don't have cash available at this point in time. So what could be a possible solution for you over here? You could look at granting, selling the goods at a discount price, granting a discount or selling it at a discount price, if, or to promote your, to improve your, to improve your cash sales. The minute a client sees that he or she is going to pay less, they would consider to buy cash or purchase for cash. So you grant a discount to improve your cash sales, okay? Then the other point, you could, and you actually must do according to the Act, you have the right to charge additional interest on an item that is purchased on credit. So that should actually encourage your client all the time buying on credit because you're charging interest now. They're going to pay more. So that is the one possible over there. Then the next point, we can put it in the same row. They actually want us to mention 3. So ma'am is rather just going to insert another row so that we can have our 3 separate. So the next point is that they only have 2 shop assistants. They only have 2, right? What can they possibly do in that case? Consider, because the minute, okay, there will be cost involved, but you can consider to increase your number of employees, because the more people you have, although you will give out money for salaries or wages, it could be that the clients are not getting good service. It's limited shop assistance, so they get frustrated and move on to a competitor to go and purchase their items over there because they don't get good service. It is where they perhaps have to wait long. So in that sense, employing another or more assistants could possibly help. So consider to increase the number of workers, or in this case, let's write the number of employees. Okay, so that the clients can get good service and more sales will then automatically happen. Then thirdly, the other point that needs to be considered is they only working for 5 days, only working 5 days a week, right? 5 days per week. So what is it that they need to do? They need to increase the number of days so that they can have better sales, right? Or improve their sales. So just simply they increase the number of working days. That has implications that could be negative, but you working an additional day could increase your sales. So they've asked for 3. That is what we have now highlighted as possible solutions for these problems. Very important. Don't just say low or high. You need to indicate, as in this case, what those percentages are. So the very last question in this section over here is looking at 3 decisions that was taken by Torga, which led to better results than those of the other 2 branches. Okay, so let's go and check. There, my information. So we have completed Ermelo now. Now they want us to look at Torga. What is different compared to the others? With Torga, first of all, they're working a total of 7 days. That is what's different. Then they are prepared compared to the other branches to spend money on advertising. Now, you clearly know at this point in time that advertising impacts your sales. If you are prepared to spend money on advertising or marketing, it will have a positive impact on your sales. Then what the business also has that is more than the others, they have in total 6 shop assistants, which tells you they're giving good service to their clients. Then we can also mention grade 12s that this business has done what the others did not, and they have opted and moved to what is called online sales. So those are the factors. I'm not going to write it down now at this point in time. Let's go back. They have spent 16,200 on advertising, more compared to the other branches. Okay? 6,200 more over here. That is how you can compare. Then the other point you could mention is that 7 days a week. The shop assistants in total is 6. And the other important point is they have online shopping. And in the online shopping, they have sold a whole 750 items. So those are the points we're going to highlight in that question. Grade 12s, let's move on to our next question. If I've got it right, remember those are the answers ma'am indicated to you now verbally. We've dictated what those answers are. I'm not going to write it in there. You should be at this point in time with where ma'am is at. Now, if you can recall, in the beginning, I told you there are 3 evaluation methods. In the exercises we've done, we've used FIFO. We have made use of the weighted average method. Now we're moving on to the third method, which is called specific identification method. Okay? Remember, ma'am said this method is very much applicable to items that's expensive, exclusive, and those items each have their own cost price. So if we look at the example over here, we can clearly see that they are selling different beds. It is the Edblow, that's the 3/4. Then the Edblow King, and then they have the Edblow Queen. So each item has its own cost price. With specific identification, lots of emphasis is put on the cost price of that specific item. So the formula to work out my closing stock using that method will be the following. I take my opening number of items. I add what I have purchased. Very, very seldom that you return these items. I'm not saying never, I'm just saying seldom. So in this case, there isn't returns. And then I will deduct the number of items I've sold. If you do so, you come to the items you have on hand. Another wording for my items on hand, you could call it the number of items that you have. Let me just go back. You could call it the number of items that you have left. Okay? So let's apply this formula by each of the various items that we have. So we have initially in my 3/4, the beginning stock is 22. I've purchased 18 items. Let me just go move up a little bit so that that can at least show. I have opening stock of 22. I purchased 18 items. Then I sold 26. This grade 12s is actually of the 3 methods. I must say this is really the easiest and also the section where you can score quite a bit of marks. So the 14 is effectively what you have left. That is the number of items you have left. So we now need to determine what is its rand value. So I have 14 left. I multiply it. Can you see why ma'am said the cost price of that item is important. I multiply it by its, allow me just to put that in, I multiply that by its cost price, and each item has their own individual cost price. I come to 39,200. Then for the king, I have 16 items. I've purchased 15. I sold 19, and I have 12 left. That 12, multiply it by the cost price of the Ed Blow King, gives me a rand value of 76,200. Then grade 12, the queen, I 4 in the beginning, opening stock. I purchased 26. I not returned, I sold 17, and therefore it leaves a number of items left of 13. That 13, I'm going to multiply by the cost price of the queen, and it gives me 106,210. Now, if you look at this calculation, it is relatively, I won't say simple, but it's almost easy marks in your bag. So once we've done that calculation, all we need to do is now add up the rand value of those items that we have left, and the value of my closing stock is 221,610 rand. Grade 12s, I hope all of you are with me in applying the specific identification. Let's quickly recap. Each item has its own cost price. The formula to find out how many items is left is my opening plus my purchases. Should there be returns, we deduct, but very seldom. We minus what we've sold. We get what we have left or on hand, and that is what we multiply by the cost price. So now we're going to move to a question that actually has that specific calculation relating to specific identification. So here they start out with a weighted average again, but if you go down and you move to the next question, they actually ask that we do a calculation. So ma'am for now is going to pause there. I'm not going to do that. We are going to concentrate where we're going to apply the specific identification method for golf clubs. Okay. So if I do that grade 12s, I need to go and find out, I need to go and find out what information are they giving here. They're speaking of the golf balls. So we're not going to look at that. We are going to look at what is the calculation for the golf clubs. Okay. So if I go to that information, the golf clubs, let's quickly read and find out what is it that they're giving to me in my information. Very important for us to note, here they are saying there is no carriage on the golf clubs. Okay? So let's go and do that calculation. I'm not just trying to highlight what's important, and we can then go ahead and do the calculation. Okay? So nothing stops us from doing it just exactly over here. So we are going to do 2.1.2. Let's just get clarity. Ma'am did not do 2.1.1 because we have covered the method where we applied the weighted average. We want to move to a question where we're going to apply the specific identification. Right. So my first item that I'm going to find the value of that closing stock will be, I have what is called straight clubs. So that is my one item. And then I have what is called my shanky clubs. Remember with this method, each item has its own cost price. So let's go. So we're first going to do the straight. First going to do the straight clubs, right? If we do so, remember we're going to apply our formula. Do you still recall what that formula is? Here we concentrate on the number of items. I had 8 initially. I purchased 80. So I'm going to highlight that for my learners. So I'm going to highlight what I've purchased, what I had in the beginning. Then I'm going to look at what I've sold in total. Like that. Another color. Let's go green there. Okay, turquoise and green. Right? So these are the items that I have sold. If you add all of them, that is my 75 plus my 3. So in total, you have sold 83. Right? I've sold 83 items if I add all of those. Now, let's do the calculation and get all our marks. So I'm going to start out with my 8 items that I have in the beginning. I'm going to add the 80 that I've purchased. What does that give me? It gives me available a whole 88 to sell. But of my 88 that I've sold, of my 88 that I have available, I have sold 83. So this is, if you don't mind, allow me, I'm just to write that for your purposes. This is what I have available. This is what, let me put it in a bracket. That is what I have available to sell. I'm just doing and all the details because remember the essence of these sessions is to make sure that learners understand clearly what it is that they need to do when it comes to calculations for the valuation methods that we apply. We have sold 83, therefore we have left 5 items. 5 left. Right? And that 5 items, I am now going to go and multiply by the unit price. Okay? How do I know what the unit price is? Over there will be my unit price, which is 4,000. So the 5 items, multiply that by my 4,900 Rand. We come to a Rand value of 220,500. Okay. Now the next one you will be doing. I've done the straight clubs. Take a minute or two and you do the Shanky clubs. And then ma'am will just indicate the answer within a few minutes. So you're going to do the Shanky clubs on your own. We're looking for its, let's make that purple. We're looking for its Rand value at the end. I'm just giving you a minute or two to do the calculation. Right. So we have, in the beginning, we're sitting with 9 items. Then I have purchased, over there 9, I've purchased 45. So I have available 54. Then I need to go and find out how many of those items have we sold. minus the items we've sold. So if I look at the items we've sold, let's go to a purple over there. That will give me a number of items. You should have in there 26 items that you've sold. So I will now minus the 26 that I've sold. I'm now not writing all that details again, grade 12s. By now you should be with me. So let's repeat. My beginning plus what I've purchased plus what I've sold. If I do so, I come to the number of items that I've left of 28. I will now just write that I have 28 left. Now the fact that I have that 28 left, what is the next step? I now need to multiply that 28 items. I now need to multiply by the cost per item. Okay, it's unique cost price. If I do so, I will multiply that by my 7,000 and I will come to a rand value of 100 and I will come to a rand value of 196,000. Grade 12, just allow me, ma'am, has put in that now as your answer over there, but this amount is actually the collective of them both. So allow me quickly just to go back and just rectify that. If I multiply 5 times, surely that can't give me 220. So let's go back. If I multiply 5 times 4,900, I come to a total of 24,500. So the amount that ma'am has put in there is the addition, 24,500. Let's go back over here, rather take that out and take that out over there and put that figure where it belongs over here as the final total. So what ma'am will be doing there, I'll highlight that answer is a total of 24,500 for my straight clubs. The answer for my Shanky clubs comes to an amount of 196,000. The addition of the two will then be, and I'll put it over here, the addition of those two figures, grade 12s, will be the amount that I have over here, which will be my 220,500. So your full answer here will be, I'm moving all of them so that they can so that it can make sense. Just sorry about that. It is the addition of the two, your final answer, that is 220,500. Okay? There we go. That's your final answer. So the 24,500 plus the 196 of the Shanky clubs give you your 220,500. Surely these two multiplied 5 times 4,900 can never be 220,500. Really sorry about that, but we've sorted and fixed that over there. So the closing stock amount is 220,500. Grade 12s, at this point in time, we are going to move on. So there's more questions. You can now take your time and work through those specific questions. For now, we need to move on to where we're actually going to go to manufacturing. So we have covered in the inventory valuation, we have covered the three methods. The method was the FIFO, the weighted average, the specific identification, and we've done calculations on each of them. I hope you have rectified that error that we had now in the specific identification method. With manufacturing, Again, a section in which we can score. What is important in manufacturing, we need to understand that in the manufacturing trade, there will be a production section, which is your factory. Then we will have a section or a department that is your administration, the paperwork. And then we have a department which is your selling and distribution. So throughout the exercises, those three and sections of a business will be included in this in the question, and then we need to do various or different calculations. Okay. So another word for my manufacturing is my cost accounting. So here we look at the various costs, your fixed costs, your variable costs, your administration costs, your types of your factory overheads, your total manufacturing costs. So I'm mentioning all of those now. Let's put it in perspective where they actually go and they give you an example and they want you to work out the following. Very important to understand. We put lots of emphasis on the factory because that is where the actual production happens. So we'll be looking at all the costs involved there, as well as finding out how many of those items have we sold to find out and to determine was the business profitable, and also doing calculations that involves finding out what my break-even point is. Now, in this case, we haven't put down lots of theory, but surely that has been covered in your class with your educator. So for now, they want us to prepare, first of all, the factory overheads note, and they want us to do the production cost statement. Very elementary, in the sense that lots of the amounts and totals is given to you. So let's start out by understanding what the information is. Grade 12s, we get material in its various forms. Okay, so material is, you can get your raw material. Then that item is in progress, which means it is not finished. And then we also get finished products. So ma'am is touching on quite a bit of our costs now, but for our purposes, we are actually going to use that background and we're going to answer the question. Okay, so my raw material, another word for a wording for my raw materials is my direct material. Okay, and let's not forget the important cost, which is my direct labor cost. Those are the employees who actually manufacture the product, and that cost forms an integral part of my factory costs. Okay, so let's start. I have raw materials, and the amounts is given to me from, this is my previous year and this is my current year. Okay, so this will be beginning and that will be the end of the year. Indirect materials, these are the costs that is included in the manufacturing process, and it also forms part of the cost of the goods. Okay, then my work in progress is my items that is not finished at the end of a specific financial period. So let's move grade 12s and understand that they're giving us what the cost is in the beginning of the year of the raw materials, indirect, and the work in progress. And then they're giving us an extract telling us what it is that we've purchased in the form of raw materials, how much was spent on my employees. Another word for workers here could also be production wages, or it could be direct labor costs. What and who's my factory foreman? This is the person in a supervisory capacity, but he or she doesn't physically work with the product, so that will be indirect labor. Then my rent, remember these are costs that are incurred in the running of your factory. So all of these, as it appears over here, will form part of my factory overhead costs. It indicates to us that for rent, 3/4 is used. For the factory uses 3/4, the rent expense needs to be allocated 3/4 of the amount over there. My indirect material purchase, as ma'am said, it forms an integral part. You can't finish off the product if you don't have that indirect material, okay? Also referred to as consumable stores. Then we have the water and electricity telling us the factory used 75%, the insurance for the factory as a whole, and then the depreciation, very important. When you see information on depreciation, make sure it refers to the factory or the plant, not depreciation of my items in my admin building or my assets in my admin building. Right. Now, they want to do the factory overhead note. Now, if you can recall, let's do it over here. My indirect labor is the factory foreman. Okay, so my indirect labor is an amount of 7,500. My indirect material, there's a bit of a calculation involved there. So if I look at my indirect material, let's go to the top. My indirect material in the beginning, let's start with the beginning. In the beginning of the year is 920. My indirect material at the end of the year is an amount of 1,300. My indirect material that I have purchased is 2,200 Rand. So those I'm going to use in my calculation, right? So beginning plus what I have purchased, deduct what I have at the end, and I'm sitting with a total of 1,820. If you can recall, remember these are all my factory expenses. My rent, we in total was spent 14,000, but only 3/4 is accruing to belongs to the factory, and the amount there then comes to 10,500. Also, another factory cost is my water and electricity. My water and electricity, they're telling us, is 75%. So what we now do is we take 75% and we calculate it, and we get an amount of 4,950. Okay? Then let's move. My insurance is 5,200. 5,200 I take directly and I put the amount in here. Grade 12s, if you can clearly see that from here in the example, from here to this amount over here, they've actually changed and they have not used 9,600, but they've used 6,600. So to avoid confusion, is it okay if you can just change that amount to 6,600 for this calculation over here to make sense? Okay, that is in the example. Ma'am is picking it up over here now, and let's just fix it. So I'll rather change that to 6,600 for this calculation over here to make sense. Then my insurance I'm taking directly, and my depreciation on my factory is 7,300. If I do all of those together and I add that, the amounts over there, I should come to 38,470. Now, grade 12, this figure will be used when I calculate or when I do, that's a bit dark, when I calculate or when I do my, let's take a lighter one. When I calculate or when I do my production cost statement. Okay, let's do the production cost statement. Now, the formula of the statement, or the format, not the formula, the format of the statement should be in your head. So we move and we look at my direct material, we add my direct labor cost, those together gives me my prime cost. Once I have my prime cost, I add my factory overhead cost, which we should now just calculated, and then I will come to my total manufacturing cost. We move on to where we add my work in progress in the beginning. I will get a total or a figure with no detail next to it. I then take off my work in progress at the end of the year, and I come to a cost amount of production of finished goods of 240. Let's quickly go and check where we have obtained those figures from. My raw material in the beginning was 15,000. I have raw material at the end of 9,800. I have purchased in total raw material to the value of 152,600. So that calculation over there will be as follows. My beginning plus my purchases minus what I have at the end, 157,800. My direct labor costs, grade 12s, they're telling me what my direct labor cost is over here. My workers, my factory workers over there, okay? Involved process, so that is my direct labor cost is 32,800. Okay, so we're putting the 32,800 in there. That's a bit fast now. Then I add these two, I come to amount of 190,600. Let's go back. I add my direct material with my direct labor. I come to 190,600. Just a while ago, we have calculated the factory overheads. So that figure now gets slot. We slot that figure into our statement over there. What do we do with these two totals? We add them. I come to total manufacturing cost. My total manufacturing cost will now have an amount added to it, which is my work in progress. In the beginning, they filled it out for you. Ma'am is just showing you where we're getting that from. That is the work in progress at the beginning. They've also given us our work in progress at the end. So that figure I will also use in my statement. So if I do so, grade 12s, let's quickly continue. My 27,030 has been put in for me, right? Typed in for me. If I add these two, I come to a figure of 256,100. What do I deduct? I now deduct my work in progress at the beginning of the year. Right? Sorry, rephrase. This is my work in progress at the beginning, which I add. I now deduct my work in progress. Let's write there the end of the year, not beginning, the end. So recap. At the beginning work in progress, get a figure over there. Deduct the work in progress at the end. And we come to a amount of cost of production of finished goods of 240,000. So grade 12, there is the format. Remember, in total, there's 8 expenses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They've used 6. We also get the sundry expense, and I'm just trying to think the other expense usually that fits in here is maintenance. But for our purposes, these are the factory overheads costs for this exercise. Then with my production cost statement, usually learners score quite well over here, and we came to a figure of 240. So know how to do these calculations. Just be aware. It could be that you will be required to calculate the end amount over here, where they tell you how many items are manufactured, and they tell you what the cost price is per item. Okay? Then we need to do a calculation. Or it could be that they give you your cost of sales, they give you your beginning and your end stock, and then you need to calculate what was produced in that specific year. Now, what's good about the statement ma'am made now, these exercises actually allows you to include those calculations. So let's go to the exercise where they require us to do the calculation of direct labor costs. Remember, this forms an integral part of your variable cost. Direct labor cost, direct material costs, as well as your selling and distribution cost forms part, or it comprises your variable cost, should there be a question of that nature. So let's do that calculation, grade 12s, where we actually go and we do or work through where we have to do the direct labor cost. So let's look at our information. Let me just check. I've actually prepared that we're going to do our direct labor cost over here. So when it comes to direct labor cost, you are going to go and find out how many workers they have, how many hours they work, and what is the rate. That's for normal time. Then we also get what is called our overtime, usually much more than your normal time because the hours are inconvenient. So it will be more. So let's go and find out what the number of workers is that they have in this exercise, as well as the hours and what the rate is. So all of these over here becomes important. They have 3 workers. They worked in total 1,920 normal hours. They've worked in total 95 overtime hours. The normal rate per hour is 50 Rand. But when it comes to the overtime, they're telling us that 60% is added. So we're going to use all of that information we're going to use now in our calculation. Surely at this point in time, you're sitting with your question paper and your answer book. So make sure you have this information open with you, because we're going to take this information now and we're going to slot that in my calculation over here. So what is the first section that we're going to do? We're going to look at what is my normal time. Okay, so my normal time is as follows. I have 3 workers. That's the number of employees working for me. I'm going to multiply it. You remember we had 1,920 hours in total that the 3 of them worked. Then we also know that they are being remunerated at a rate of 50 Rand per hour. If I do that calculation, I come to a figure of 288,000 Rand. That's normal time. Then for my overtime, the calculation will be slightly different. I still have 3 employees working for me. I still have 3 employees working. Okay. Then the amount of hours that they worked for overtime in total is 95, if you can follow me. So I'm going to multiply that by the 95. Ma'am, we'll just afterwards recap where I'm getting all of these totals or hours worked from. I'm going to multiply that by. Now, the overtime they told me is if I've got it right, 60% more. So I will take, just do the calculation over here. I will take the 50 Rand and I will multiply it by 160 and I will divide it by 100, because I now need to find out, what the increased price is. If I do so, I take my 50, I multiply it by 160 and I divide it by 100. I then discover that my overtime rate is 80 Rand. So now I'm going to multiply that with 80, because the overtime is more than the normal time because of the number of hours that they work in a time span that is almost inconvenient. Weekends, public holidays, and therefore the rate is more. So my Rand value for that calculation, grade 12, will be 22,000. Let me write it in over here, equal to 22,800. Now that added to the total above it of 288, the normal time, then will give me an overtime, a rate for direct labor, or Rand value for direct labor of 310,800. That is my answer over there for direct labor. Okay, it could also be called production wages. Then my factory overhead note is as follows. Ma'am has filled in my indirect material, my expense for rent, the water and electricity, the insurance, and the depreciation on the factory. So my indirect material, if you don't mind, I promised you I was going to get back to the number of hours worked over there. Let's just recap and make sure you understand that all of that information ma'am got over there. 3 workers, 1,920 hours normal, 95 hours overtime, 50 Rand normal rate, and we've indicated 80 Rand overtime. Look at my information that I need in order to complete my factory overhead note. Okay, so my factory overhead note has in indirect material, my rent expense according to floor space in square meters. I have my water and electricity, I have my insurance, and I have my depreciation on the factory. So my indirect material will again be that calculation where I'm going to, let me show you where I'm getting the figures from. Okay, there's my indirect material. So these totals over here becomes important for me to do that calculation. Okay, then I need to find out, have I purchased indirect material? Let's go down. I'm going to mark all of that green. Yes, I have over there, 149. I'm highlighting that. And then I'm going to use those figures to do my calculation. So my beginning, my end, and what I have purchased in the form of indirect material. Okay, so let's go and let's go do that calculation. So my beginning was 18,600. I hope you're following me. Then I'm going to add the 149,500 that we have purchased. And then I'm going to deduct, I'm going to deduct the amount that I have on hand, 21,400. Close my bracket. If I do so, grade 12s, I come to an amount of 146,700. Allow me, let's recap my beginning, plus what I've purchased, minus what I have left in the form of indirect material, and that's the value that it now adds up to. Then my rent expense, they're telling me clearly that my rent, where am I getting it from, is an amount of, let's go and check, my rent is an amount of 169,000. Okay, so that rent of 169,000 I now take, and they also telling me it's according to my floor space. Okay, so I will say 169,000. Then I'm going to multiply it. In total, the floor space is 13,500 square meters. Where do I get that information from? Let's quickly go there. They actually tell me, sorry, I'm going a bit too fast over here. They're telling me that my floor space in total is 13,500 square meters, and the factory occupies 10,800 square meters of that total space. So what will we do? That will be our denominator. That will be our numerator to find out what percentage in the form, but this case we need it in Rand, is the business using to do its operations for the factory. So here will be 10,800. Okay, let's just take that closer over there. I'm dividing it by the 13,500 square meters. If I do that full calculation, let's just take that away. I come to a figure of 135,200. Then let's do the water and electricity. The water and electricity reads as follows. They're telling us that the factory occupies 75%. That is what they're telling us. The factory occupying 75%, so ma'am is punching that in. I'm now going to find out what is the total of my water and electricity. So the total spent for the year is 172. Let's make that yellow. But you cannot ignore what they are telling us over here. Still outstanding. So the form of water and electricity is still 18,000. So logically speaking, thinking of what I would do in my SOCI, I now need to take this 18,000, add it to my 172, and that will be my total rent expense. And from there, we multiply it with the 75%. Call what those totals are. It is an amount of 172,000 already spent. I still owe water and electricity to the amount or value of 18,000. What's the next step? I need to multiply that grade 12s with 75%. If I do so, I come to a rand total of 142,500. Then for the other expenses, I'm just going to slot that in. That comes directly from my expense information given to me in the form of a table. That will be my depreciation and then my insurance. Be careful, they said for all of the factory. So I'm going to use the entire amount. So those two figures we're going to take and we're simply going to slot that in over here. Okay, so the amount for insurance for the factory is 105,900 and the amount for the depreciation is 61,200. So if I add all of these grade 12s, 200, if I add all of them, I come to a figure of 591,500. Very important. This figure is going to form part now of my production cost statement. Grade 12, at this point in time, we need to complete the production cost statement. Okay. Can we, for now, at least just go and fill in the figures that we can take directly from here. Remember the format. So over here, we know we're going to put in my direct labor. Then we also know in here, I'm going to put my factory overheads. Okay. Direct labor amount, remember we calculated that already. Go back to your information and we're going to put in the 310,800. Where am I getting that from? I'm getting it from my calculation that I have done over here. 310,800. Then I'm also have now just completed my factory overheads, 591,500. That is what I'm going to enter in there. Now, you know, if I add these two, I will get my prime cost. If I do so, I come to 977,500. So very important. These two costs, grade 12, comes from calculations that I have done prior to me or myself completing the production cost statement. Then these two figures added will now give me a total of 1,591,000. Okay. Sorry, it's jumping a bit. It shouldn't do that, but it is. For now, we're now not going to spend time, but you understand that these two added gives me 1,569,000. They filled out the work in progress already for us. These two figures we must now add. If we add them, give you a minute, we come to a total of 1,764,000 is what we come to over there. Then grade 12s, interesting, they have not given to us what the work in progress is, but I do know at the end, I do know it comes in a bracket. That's the one thing I do know. And I also know that I now can work bottom up. So I'm interested in the goods that was. Okay, so if I do that, I do the following calculation. I am now going to go find out what is my that I must do here. In the middle, we're going to put our cost of, my cost of sales. That's the middle amount that we're going to put in there, right? Then we're going to put right at the beginning, remember we need to find out what was produced for that specific year. In the beginning, or the first total, we're going to find out how many items do I have left. What is ma'am referring to? Let's go to our information. This is what I'm referring to. These two figures. I have that left in finished goods. And at the beginning of the previous year, I had that left in finished goods. So these two totals becomes very important if you have to do that calculation. So left at the beginning, left at the end of the current year. This is left at the end of the previous year. So these two totals I will use to find out what was produced together with the cost of sales. How do I get what the amount is for cost of sales? Remember, that is the sales. And I know that my markup is 60%. So if I take 60% of 2,500, I will get my sale amount, cost of sale amount of, if you don't mind, let ma'am put it in, quickly multiply. I'll give you a minute to do so. 2,500 multiply by my, or working out my cost of sales, you will know my 100 will be on top and my 160 at the bottom. If I do so, your cost of sales amount should be, I hope you're there, 1,562,500. Cost of sales, okay? So those three amounts I'm going to use to get what I need to put in there. So let's quickly go. My finished goods at the end of the year, end of the previous year, as well as my cost of sales. Okay, the amount of my cost of sales is 1,562,500 Rand. So let's put that in, and we're going to end off with a statement. So let's do my calculation. My 210, which is left at the beginning of the current year, I'm going to put first. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to add my cost of sales. Remember, we've done that calculation. 1,562,500. And then, why is it that I must take off the finished stock of the previous year? Remember, we need to calculate what was produced within this year, the current year. Therefore, it must make a lot of sense that we're going to take off the 233,000 finished goods of the previous year. Okay, so let's just recap. Finished goods of the current year, cost of sales, finished goods of the previous year. Once I do that calculation, I will now determine what the finished goods was for the current year. And if I do that calculation, give yourself a minute to do so, come to a figure of 1,539,500. Okay, now we're going to work bottom up. You know, if we work bottom up, this figure changes signs. But because this is a missing figure over there, we're simply going to take my cost of finished goods, deduct it from this rand value over here that has no detail in my statement. If I do so, I've already put my brackets in there for my work in progress at the end. You should come to a total. Let's quickly deduct those two from each other. Give you a minute to do so. Is 20. I've said 20. It should actually be 224,500. Grade 12s, be careful. Require you at times to do calculations of this nature where you need to do the calculation of finished goods in the, okay? So very important format, know the format of your statement, but also understand that there can be calculations that it requires a bit of insight other than you just taking or getting what the amount is that they have spent for producing goods in a specific year. So for now, grade 12s, ma'am is going to end of year. The other exercises in the pack you should be doing on your own. Prepare well, paper to a section in which you can score well. Please make effort, work on a daily basis, and you will do well in your upcoming examinations. Thank you.